Welcome to the Craig and Greg Show, presented by Maximize Leadership. Now, here are Craig Owens and Greg Harris.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Craig and Greg Show. I am Craig. This is Greg. Welcome in to the new Maximize Leadership studio. It looks really good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nice job.
A lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and some sawdust.
And swearing.
Sweat and tears. That would go with everything, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Blood, sweat, and tears, and swearing. Yeah, cussing under your breath.
That's why I stayed away, because I didn't want to get caught up in all of that.
I took ibuprofen for the headache.
Yeah. Hey, what we want to talk to you about today is a really kind of a relationship between leaders and their teams. And I was thinking about the other day, my wife made a comment about my dog and her gray hair. And she says, isn't it true that, owners and pets, after a while, they look alike? And so it just kind of matched your hair. But in all seriousness, I've noticed that in organizations, I'm sure you have as well, when you walk in there is a similarity over time between the way that the leader leads and the way that the rest of the team follows. And, us being very biased towards leadership, we would say it's not really a chicken or the egg, like which came first. Right. It's clearly the leader at first is setting the pace, and then there's a following. But is that a good thing? Is the team supposed to start looking like their leader, or are they still supposed to be kind of their own individuals and they don't look like their leader?
I think, Craig, over time, people do realize how things work in an organization. But as the leader sorts to set the sail, I think people figure out where they need to be on the sailboat.
Sure.
Or like you can use the Jim Collins, get on the seat in the bus, etc. Yep. But I think there's something to be said for not being a robot, but being a reflection.
Yes.
And there are probably some things us leaders could kind of maybe redo, reassess, reset, reestablish. What are those ethos? What is our culture? What's leadership going to recognize? I think at some point it's a reflection both ways versus a one-way mirror.
Absolutely. And I think that it's important, it's healthy for a leader if you see something in your teammates that you don't necessarily like. I think the first thing that a leader should do is go look at themselves in the mirror and say, well, okay, wait a minute. If I'm seeing this response, what have I done to trigger that, or what have I done to allow that? What's going on in me first?
Am I promoting it?
Yes.
Am I allowing it?
Right.
Yeah, interesting. I think, for most people on a team, I don't really always like the word followers.
Right.
But because the goal of leaders is to develop other leaders, not more followers, I think the reflection is fascinating. So things go a little sour. One quarter is a little off. Everyone's on eggshells because the boss is.
Right.
But if the boss goes, hey, we've got an opportunity here. We know what we lost. We know what opportunities didn't come through our door. Now we're up for the next quarter. And this is so maybe optimism, hopefulness, maybe some confidence that maybe the team needed. So us as leaders do reflect something, and they react to us, right?
Yep. Well, and I know you've experienced that on the sports field, where you could have a team that's starting to get a little dejected, like this game's getting away from us, and there can be that one usually vocal leader. But usually those vocal leaders are also the one that their play does a lot of the talking for them as well. And when they say, come on, guys, we got this, and they kind of strap in and really step up, you see the rest of the team rally to that. So it does take somebody to say, all right, I don't like where we're going right now, so follow me as we make this change.
Life can be like a little bit of a river where there's a tide, right? There's a flow of water. And at some point, us on the leadership teams, we're like, we're going the wrong direction. We're going fast. The water is going where it wants to, not where we want it. And someone has to maybe get out of the canoe and stop it. Portage. Yep. Get somewhere else. I think at some point for a lot of the teammates with the leader, they watch.
Oh, sure.
And I think that's something that us leaders need to recognize. They're looking, they're watching. How did you handle bad news? How did you handle when someone said they're leaving, here's your 2 weeks notice, and it was a really key person?
Yep.
How did you handle when you didn't get the sale of, maybe it was a renewal of a big client and they left? Or you got news that you can't sell that product anymore, or there's a software glitch. How we react really does. Can we reduce this to a small rain shower versus a storm?
Yeah.
You've got those stories.
Well, yeah, and I think that's what people look to when that bad news comes in. Yeah. They look at the leader and they go, "Oh, look how the leader's responding." We don't see panic on that leader's face, and so, oh, okay, and so that's where I think it's a good thing that the rest of the team is following the leader in that spot. But I think that there's also, it can be the other way around, that the leader can get the pulse of or the feel for what's going on. And if you've watched our episodes, I'm going to say something that you've probably heard many times before. Leaders, you can't do that if you're just closeted away in your office.
Yeah.
You gotta be out there. You have to be, right here talking to somebody. How's it going? What's happening? What's,
right.
I want to be here right in the trenches with you, not, up on high, just sending down these edicts.
I think to get a reflection, you can't have a door.
Yeah.
I had a leader that I really respected. He was just gentle. He was kind, and he would walk around, and that's how he led.
Yep.
He wasn't edict. He didn't have a trumpet. He didn't get on a bully pulpit. He just walked around and checked in. And when he checked in, you're like, he cares.
Yeah.
And that sort of a reflection caused a lot of us to say, hey, if we saw an opportunity, we care as well.
Yes. Yep.
And he passed on one of those traits of just care. Care for people, care for what's going on, care to make a change, care to stand up, care, go for justice, et cetera, and just care.
Well, and what does it do to the team when the leader comes by and says, hey, I just noticed how you handled that. You kind of freelanced a little bit. That's a little bit different, but I like that. That seemed to flow a little bit more. I think we want to start adopting what you were just doing. What does that do for the team when the leader recognizes that?
Well, you get credit. Right. And then also the teammates realize he or she noticed something in the team, not in themselves. Yep. And so it really is almost a compliment to the leader to say, yeah, I've got some bright and shining stars right here. What do you guys think?
Right.
I think the edict is, the tough part about, having a reflection, because then everybody's bossing around. But I love the reflection mutually.
Yes.
You had brought that up in our previous kind of notes where we were kind of going back and forth, and I thought, I never really thought about that way. Actually, Craig, I was like, yeah, the leader reflects, and then they kind of follow suit, step in line, continue it. But what happens if you've got some up and coming, developing leaders, emerging leaders, and you're like, I can see in a couple of years she'll be running this. He's going to be over here. She'll be doing that. I mean, it's the promise of potential.
Right.
I also know when people see the stresses, right, and the answer is adrenaline or stress.
Yeah.
A really great leader finds adrenaline in that.
Yeah.
Maybe not right away. Let's just pause a minute. The stresses is, well, we got to get that done. The decibels like, okay, I'm not deaf.
Right.
But they're so emotional.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you can't be emotional as a leader. You should be. You should have passion.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I think when you fight for your teammates, you're passionate, but you don't have to fight against the world.
Right. Well, and you have to, if I want my teammates to be, I'll use one trait, if I want them to be teachable, I have to demonstrate that I'm teachable. Yeah. It can't be like, do what I say, not what I do. So any one of those traits that we want in our team, we have to be able to demonstrate it ourselves in our own lives, which is another reason why you have to get out of your office so people can see that. But you have to, hey, I like your ingenuity. Let me show you some of my ingenuity. I like the way that you did this. Do you see the same thing in me? And right. And it's got those two, because I think what happens is it's almost like not a reflection later on as it starts going, but it's like, hey, my team took it to here, which means I got to go to here. And so now I've lifted the lid for them to go to here. And that's really, I have to think as a leader, the reason why I want to learn, the reason why I want to improve is because not that I want people to go, wow, look at how good he is. Right. I want to be able to lift the lid for other people to go past me.
I think this is a little bit of a wake-up call for some of us in leadership. If you don't see the potential in your teammates, you're going to continue to hire people who are, let's say you're a 6 on a scale of 1 to 10. You're going to hire 4s and 5s because I love seeing when someone came in, you're like, yep, she's already an 8. Oh, goodness, what a great hire.
Yeah.
And some don't like that. It's not a reflection. And so I had that in a situation not too long ago where we had a person maybe over HR, over personnel, maybe they kind of thought that was their shtick, and it wasn't. And then people wouldn't go to him. It was a reflection.
Yep. Well, I got a funny one. I remember one time I had a friend of mine that I invited him to come speak at our church. He's got a phenomenal ministry that he oversees, and I wanted our congregation to hear about this. And he's a dynamic speaker, very engaging, and he comes in and he speaks. And I had somebody in our congregation that came to me and said, I can't believe you brought him in to speak. And I said, why? And he says, he was so good. And I went, ooh, yeah, he was, but what? Why? Well, I think a lot of pastors don't want somebody to come in who, is so dynamic because, then people might go, well, boy, now what are we going to do? It's a step back to, and he was actually, I think I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that he was trying to protect me.
Or compliment.
Yeah. But
a little different way.
Yeah, but I just thought that was unusual. But that's what a lot of people, like you just said. And what's ironic is, you just said somebody's a 6 on the leadership scale. I bet you he thought he was a 10.
Well, that's another story.
Yeah, that's he probably thought he was a 10 plus.
We maybe did that. Did we? Arrogance and ignorance?
Yes.
Well, boy, he's got both.
But,
anyway.
But then when they hire these people that are 4s and 5s, they probably think, boy, you guys are so lucky that I hired you because you're going to learn so much from me. Yeah. And they don't even realize that's part of that ignorance and arrogance that they're like, that they're putting the lid, they're holding everybody down. And you know what? Those people are going to start to become reflections of that leader. Mm-hmm. Or if they're very competent, they're not sticking around. They're going to leave because they realize this is a nowhere job.
I think the reflection from us in leadership, it's something that we can control until they receive it. Let's play with that a minute. So do they believe what they saw in me as a leader? Have they seen it enough to say, oh, that is definitely a really well-established habit?
Right, not an exception to the rule, but yes.
So I think consistency might play into this reflection. Yes. So I had another person that I worked alongside, and they loved to share all the good news from the pulpit or the podium. So positive and, just encouraging, And afterwards in the lunchroom, you see them commiserate and, I got to pay the bills here. I got to, cut back on light bulbs. And you're like, so which reflection am I going to believe, the one that I just see in the lunchroom or the one behind the microphone in front of everybody?
Yep.
So I think that's just a good gut check. So we might reflect something. If they don't receive it, it's probably on us.
Absolutely.
What do we do with that?
Well, let me give you a quote here.
Oh, yeah.
From a very gifted speaker and coach and advisor and author by the name of Greg Harris.
I thought you were going to say Dick Brogden.
Leadership isn't a title. It's an example to model, to reflect, and to embody. Mm-hmm. Well said.
Thank you, sir.
It's not that somebody earns the title and then immediately they think, well, now everybody's got to do things my way. Everybody be a reflection of me. But like I said earlier, they're not willing. They're not embodying what they want. They're not empowering other people to get to that level.
Right.
They're almost like bullying people to be like me, do it like I do it. That's not what leadership is. That's being a boss. That's being a tyrant.
Yeah.
That's not being a leader.
No. I think there's so many definitions and maybe even examples of what is leadership and what is bossing, leading and bossing, and they might get a little gray.
Yeah.
Like the person I was kind of talking about was, they love to, be up front, but then once the lights were off and the microphones turned off, they really didn't shine.
Yeah, but see, don't you think that's
They get it.
that's the real thing, and people see that. I mean,
They do.
when they see you not in the spotlight, behaving differently,
Right.
that's they say, okay, that's what the real you is right there.
I think it's really not about culture in this episode. It's more about leadership. I think it does impact the influence of
of course,
culture,
yeah.
but it's not about a culture change. It's really like a leadership. Like, are you self-aware that they're going to reflect you? I think the part for me right now is the challenge of, I want to be sincere and genuine. And if maybe that's not what they wanted to have that person pretend like you're going to get an Oscars up there or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not that guy no more.
Right.
I mean, maybe I had to try like crazy when we were younger in our career, but now I just want to be salt of the earth.
Yes.
And what ended up happening in my last example where, HR wasn't the gift of the person. And then two of us partners, we would get a lot of folks come in, hey, do you got a minute? And we had to reflect and kind of like bite the bullet and say, I know why you're here, because you don't feel safe to go to him, and he's in your department.
Right.
I get it.
Right.
And so you have to be reflective, like, okay, I'm gonna reflect Jesus here. I'm gonna listen.
Yes.
And I think that's where our challenge for leaders really comes down to is we can listen, it's declaring edicts.
Right.
At what point they're going to unplug the microphone eventually from us.
Right. Well, and I love the example of Jesus, because so he said it with words first. He said, look, I could be the one that's seated here at the table and everybody's serving me. He said, but I didn't come to be served, but to serve and to give my life. And then he demonstrates it by getting down on the floor and starting to wash everybody's feet.
That's amazing.
And, no spotlights, right? No, that wasn't trying to win a performance. He just said, look, this is what I'm going to do. And interestingly, it's in John chapter 13. It's the only time that Jesus ever says to his followers, I've given you an example to do what I have just done. And that's when he washed their feet.
Example.
This is the example I've given you. This is how I've empowered you. Let me go back to your quote. Leadership isn't a title. It's an example to model, to reflect, to embody. That's what Jesus did for us. Arguably, well, I don't even think there's an argument. The greatest leader ever, most perfect leader ever.
Right.
And if anybody could have been like, he's up there and we just, he said,
Right.
I'm going to empower you to do it the way that I've done it.
I wonder for us on teams where we've all been on them, sometimes you get to lead them, sometimes you're, part of the roster, and that's okay. At some point, they are going to test out, is it real?
Oh, absolutely.
The reflection.
Yep.
Or is it a mirage?
Yep.
So I think that's our challenge as we kind of come in for a landing. I know you got another quote to share about the highlights from Dick Brogden, but I think it's the reflect, or do we radiate something, that they're willing to say, I want to be like that.
Yep.
And it's just out of grace that you find out, okay, so someone was, the CEO or the president or the chair, blah, 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 the general manager of the partnership. And then they have to kind of pass the baton.
Yep.
And when people see that, they're like, wow, it wasn't all about him. You know what? She's just handling this with grace. Wow. So I think that's how we,
Yes.
want to finish, brother.
Yep.
It's, we want to be up there with a microphone. Yeah, we want to be up on the podium. Yeah, we want to run the meeting.
But why? Why do we want to do that?
I know.
Do you want to do that so that people say, look at how wonderful he is?
Right.
It's kind of like that one of like, I've heard the story about Queen Elizabeth was talking about a couple of people, and she said, one guy, when he comes in the room, I feel like he's the most important person in the world. The other guy, when he comes in the room, I feel like I'm the most important person in the world. Because he wasn't in there just to say, look at me, how can I help you? How can I help you? And that's what I think leaders.
That's a great wake-up.
You mentioned my cousin, Dick Brogden.
Yeah.
He wrote a book, a commentary on the Proverbs, and I love this. This is just an excerpt from one part. He says, the primary ingredient in good leadership is wise followership. Wise leaders invest primarily in making their followers wise and in learning from their followers who are wise. And it's that constant, feed, but the leader has to go first. I'm going to invest in wise followers, and then I'm going to learn from wise followers, and then I have more to invest in them, and the cycle continues.
He's a good guy, too. You just quoted him.
He is a good guy.
You might be related to him. But I think, as we influence and inspire people, they probably have to see us. Right? We talked about don't be behind your door in the office.
Get out of your office.
Yeah. Lead by manage or walking around, whatever the terminology is. But I think for the true reflection, we have to be real.
Yep.
And I think that's going to be our challenge as we close up here is just, if we're not real, the reflection is maybe a broken mirror.
Yep.
It's not good. It's not accurate. And that's our job as leaders, to be more accurate, more accountable, and hopefully inspire people to be real themselves. Because then the team, like I'm working with a business on succession planning, and he's going to have to step out. But his team isn't ready for him to step out, but they're ready. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yep.
Like they really like him, but he's getting there to, I'm going to maybe give up this a little bit. And they're not like, oh no, we can't do it. It's actually, we're so used to you doing it well, but we're ready.
Yep.
And I think that's our leadership goal.
Yep.
Are they ready?
Yep. Well, listen, friends, where you're going to see some gaps between where you want to be and where you actually are is when you go through a difficult time and the way that you respond there. And this is a great place for a coach, because one of the things that a coach can do is they're outside your organization, and they'll look at something and they don't have the skin in the game. They're not passionately involved in it and emotionally involved in it the way that you are and the way that your teammates are. And so it's a great place for a coach to give you that insight. And that's what we would love to do for you. So if you go to Maximize Leadership, we have a link on there, a page on there about coaching. You can read a little bit about it, but what you can do is scroll down to the bottom. There's a form there. Just fill in the details and say, look, this is kind of where I'm struggling. I see this in my team, or I see this in myself, and I just don't know maybe how to get over that next step. This is where we can come in, and we'll assess the situation. It might be one of us that would do some coaching with you. We have some other coaches that we might refer to you, but we want to help you be able to help your team go to the next level, because when they go to the next level, they're going to help you go to the next level, and it'll become a beautiful thing. So check that out. We'd also love to get some feedback from you. If you want to comment below on this video, or on Twitter, or I should say it's X now, on Maximize Podcast, you can send us a message there. Give us a little feedback on what we've shared today, or maybe offer a suggestion. Say, here's a topic that I'd like for you guys to weigh in on. We'd be happy to do that as well. We want to be here to resource you, because when you get better, your team gets better. When your team gets better, you get better. And when you guys all get better, everybody around you gets better. It's a beautiful thing. And so that's what we're here to help you out with. So stay tuned. We got lots more wonderful, helpful content that's coming up for you real soon.
Get in touch with Craig and Greg through Twitter at Maximize Podcast or at MaximizeLeadership.com. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any episodes of The Craig and Greg Show.